So a lot of you know this car. A lot of you've seen it in the background in some of my other videos. It's not been off of this lift in years. So you caught us in the middle of a shop cleanup. You saw the video where we painted the outside and kind of cleaned the outside up, updated it, made it look a little better. Now we're doing the same thing inside. And it's time to get this dust collector down off of the storage rack, which isn't supposed to be a storage rack. It's supposed to be a usable lift, but it never gets used for a lift because we just don't have enough room. But we're gonna take it down, clean it up. Before I take it down, I'm gonna get this Challenger out from under here. We'll go underneath and look at it. I'll show you a few things so you got an idea what it is. I built it in 2015. But the main object here is to clean it up, talk about it, and think about the possibilities of putting it back together as a 3,000 horsepower street car again. Let's get it off of the lift. Let's look at this thing just a little bit. It's got 4-inch exhaust all the way out the back, which is kind of cool because I like the look, but I also like the fact that the noise isn't right in front like most turbo cars. But it's titanium. It's like, I don't remember the thickness, 25 or something titanium. I always liked this part of the car. So as a street car, it ran on gasoline. I have 2 fuel cells in the back, and I raced on different things. Back when I was doing this, 2015 is when I brought this back out. Hot Rod had a stick in their butt. They wouldn't let you have, and they were particular about the fuel. You couldn't run methanol. So everybody's trying to run 3,000 horsepower on E85 and gasoline, and it was hard. I don't know what took them so long. They'd say, but you can't buy it at the pump, was their excuse for a long time. You can't buy C16 or Q16 at the pump either. But you could buy gasoline. It was really a dumb thing, period. It was just dumb. They finally, after Tom Bailey got sick week, he said, and so did Matt Frost with Race Week, you could run any fuel you wanted. You're gonna carry your own fuel. Back then we had to carry our own fuel. You're gonna carry it anyway. You're not gonna go to a gas station and get C16, which is gonna take C16 or Q16 or E85 to make the kind of power these cars were making. But if you're an unlimited class, you could run methanol. That was the only class, unlimited. So make that make sense. Unlimited, the rules were okay. Super street or street race or anything else, you couldn't run it, even though the cars were going stupid fast. Nowadays, super street cars are as fast or faster than the unlimited cars back then. We had the first car that ran a 7 at Drag Week. In 2017, Denny Turgis put together a 67 Camaro with a Pro Charger, and they averaged 760 during the week. That was the first 7-second pass on Drag Week, and they ran 7s all week. And Turgis called me up, well, shortly after Drag Week in 2017, right, Debbie?
2007.
2007. Man, time flies. Denny called me and said, I had a car for sale, a Willys that I built. And he said, you want to trade for my Camaro? And I thought, what Camaro? I remember being stunned. I didn't know what he had, but I knew that he had the fastest car in street racing history. I thought there's no way he'd trade that for my Willys. Although my Willys, I think I had it at the time for $150,000. So in 2007, that was a $150,000 car. It was a lot of money. But I said, the black Camaro? And he said, yeah. I said, why would you do that? He said, I've done what I wanted to do with it. One drag week, one unlimited. Probably cars will never be faster. I thought the same thing. No cars are going to go faster on the street than 7s. Well, now 7s are like Tom Bailey said one time, logs falling off the back of a truck. Everybody does 7s. 7s are accidental. If she lifts at the 8th mile, she goes faster than that. She goes into 7. She went into 690 the other day, lifting just past the 8th mile. So things have gotten stupid fast. But my point is that they only let the cars in unlimited run methanol. So the rest of us that were basically running the same motors as they were back then, we're having to struggle with the fuel. So this one I ran E85. Biggest pain in the neck. I know a lot of you like E85. I don't want to hear the comments. You're welcome to it. You can have all of it. You guys can have every drop of E85 made. I don't care. If that's what you like, it's fine. I don't want to run E85 anymore. I especially don't want to drive on it because there's not that many stations. When we were doing it, we had to search for stations to fill up with E85, so I just don't want to go through that. So I eventually made this thing run on Q16, I think I had. I don't remember exactly, honestly, but a gasoline, either C or Q. And I ran 2 fuel systems, and you kind of see that as I'm standing here talking. I see it. One of these is street system, and one of them's race system. Obviously, this is race. It's bigger, running down both sides. And I can do it a lot different now, and I will when I put this thing back together. But back in 15, when I built this thing, I was trying to fit in super street class, which meant I had to have stock suspension. And I'll probably change that. If I go back together with it, I'll probably change it to a 4-link, and I'll go and modify it if I ever race it again. I'll get into that in just a little bit. But what I was talking about was here. So when you do a burnout, of course, you stack rubber back here. The problem with that was my fuel systems are there, and I have valves. So that's my race tank. And it's over in this corner. I have to open that up and switch valves. I have to switch return lines and feed lines to the pump. This is all titanium. It might say on there, 032. 4-inch 032 titanium. And I pie cut and did all of the bins because I didn't have any bins for titanium, and went over all the way to the front. Now, this is a set of Caltrac springs, the heavy duty Caltracs, and this is a set of Caltracs DT tracks. I made these because I make almost everything. I could make those faster than I could mail order them. So that's what I did back in 2015. And I had a lot of trouble with it. And I know a lot of you run Caltracs, and I know a lot of you are way better at it than I am. But this thing had some impressive 60-foot times, and it worked. But I honestly ripped. You'll see the big 5/8 U-bolts here. It had 1/2-inch U-bolts on it, and it had a different spring perch here. And one of the first outings on drag week with it, it bent the Caltracs, and they were heavy-duty bars. They were solid DOM 1.1/8, I believe, tubing, and I tapped them. I don't remember what the inside diameter, it's for a 3/4-inch heim joint. So the wall was stupid thick on that. And when I made my pass, I come back and the tire was just about to rub. It was rubbing. In fact, it cut grooves in the tires on both sides. Big, deep grooves after the first pass at drag week. The Caltracs were bent. I looked underneath and they were bowed down. It came like that. Holy cow. And the more I got to looking, the spring pads on the rear end, they were those stamped steel type. And I'm remembering as we go, there's stamped steel pads, they're 1/4 inch thick. And I had them welded to the rear, and I had a little lowering block, probably a 1 inch based on what that looks like, maybe 3/4, and 1/2 inch U-bolts. Well, the more I looked, the U-bolts had stretched, I thought, and the spring pads were rolled. So instead of being flat, they rolled up. So I just kept examining, trying to figure out what was going on. The pinion wrapped up so hard that it smashed the 1/4 inch spring pads and rolled them, and that made the U-bolts loosen up because it actually shortened all of that. And the U-bolts were loose, the spring pads were junk, and the CalTrack bars were bent. So I panicked, first day of drag week. I don't remember where we started. Do you? No. 2015. I just don't remember. But somebody had a TIG welder, a little Blake Hughes. Blake Hughes, he did it that year with an S10, I think, and he had his trailer and he had a little TIG welder. And this was still, when I say first day, this was actually the day of registration, I guess. It was before the driver's meeting on the first day, you're allowed to have your truck and trailer. And I'm sitting there at this car, and it's just almost ripped the rear end out of it, thinking, what am I going to do? Well, I looked on the tongue of my trailer, and I had a piece of 2 inch by 1/4 inch plate that I would put a generator up there, and I'd slide this through, and I'd put a padlock on it. And I'm thinking about it, and I thought, man, if I had a welder, I might be able to cut that up. And back then we didn't have the the Milwaukee cutter. I don't remember how I cut that, but somehow I cut that plate, and I don't remember. Maybe Blake had something, but he had that welder. He had just a little bitty TIG welder, non-water cooled, of course, and a generator in his trailer. And somehow I cut that 2 inch piece of strap, and I got some pieces off of it, and I got underneath here, jacked the rear end up. Jake Shoemake was with me from Jake's Performance, and we pulled the wheels, we got under here, and I welded, sat there with that TIG, and it wouldn't get hot enough to weld 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch. So Blake was on the throttle, just that little generator was running wide open the whole time that I'm welding, trying to get enough amperage to weld that. But I did, and it was sketchy. It was ugly welding, but it worked. And then the bars, somebody made us a set. I think I made a post on Facebook, and they made a set, and they brought, I don't remember exactly.
They brought them to Martin, Michigan.
Somebody brought this set to Martin, Michigan, but there was a set in between.
Oh yeah, there was. I don't remember where that one was.
We put another, somebody else made a set of 4-link bars for us. They made them the right length and brought them to us, or we went and got, no, I think somebody went and they made them, they took ours and put new tube on it or something. I don't remember. But anyway, we put those new bars on and went out and made another pass, come back, and those new bars were bent. And they're probably still back there in the back because I kept them for a long time. What in the world? This is never going to work. The car was hooking up. It's heavy. This car was almost 4,000 pounds. It was 3,980 pounds, if I remember right. But I thought, what am I going to do? And the more I thought about it, the more it occurred to me what was happening was the spring was wrapping, because if you look here, the way a CalTrack works is when the pinion naturally wants to twist up, that pushes this bar forward, that pushes this, which rotates this bracket, rotates it down. Well, that pushes down on the spring here, and that pushes rear end into the ground. It just makes so much sense. It's so much better than an old slapper bar used to be. But that rotating action right there, that fulcrum, that bolt presses on the leaf spring. Well, the way this thing was doing it was so heavy, and it was getting such a bite, and it made so much power and torque that with the bar in this top hole, which is where most people run it, the bar was real close to this leaf spring. If I raised that up right there, it would only have 3/4 of an inch or so. And it would twist that bracket, it would put that leaf spring against the top of the bar, and it was like a press brake. It would just push down and bend this bar. So I ended up moving it to the lower hole, and that fixed that, but it didn't change the fact that when you let the button out on this thing, that rear end twists up. And since I've been back, I made all new spring pads. I did this when we came back from drag week. Made new heavy duty. These are probably 3/8, and they're boxed and all welded and tigged to the rear end. You can see the nice welds. I changed all of that and put 5/8 U-bolts on here. This never went anywhere again, but it doesn't change the fact that that pinion will twist up. That'll warp this spring. The spring becomes a S. So it warps it up this direction, and then it comes back down because this is pushing down. So that spring will warp down in the front because of that, and then it warps back up into an S. So that would move the drive shaft and the rear end forward, and the tires would rub in the front. And I had to come back and cut both ends of this, and I already had my paint on there. You see that doesn't match the angle. I just cut it and never bothered the blue paint and angled the wheel openings a little bit more. I think I will change it to a 4-link, and that just changes me from super straight class to modified class, I believe, which is fine. I'd rather have that. I've got good shocks on it from Eric Yost, Biggin. There's his name on the side of them. He had the shocks built for me, so they can be converted to a coilover. Right now they don't have the adapters on it for a coilover, but they can. I've got a good heavy duty sway bar that I built back in 15. You can see the fabricated arms. It's a big solid piece of chrome moly tubing into some brackets, billet brackets here. All that works so good. I mean, there's no problem with any of it, but I don't want solid. I don't want a leaf spring rear end anymore. I want it to be I was looking at those disc brakes. I couldn't remember what I had back there. Those are Moser disc brakes with floating rotors. So I got sidetracked there for just a minute. But transmission cooler is mounted back here. I can't remember. Yeah, it's got a fan on it. So it blows. It sucks this direction and blows out that direction. I didn't have any trouble with that. Got 2 sets of fuel rails. Titanium exhaust comes all the way through. Now, for those of you that don't know, I got this car when I turned 16. I was in California. I was in high school, obviously. And I could have got, I chose a Nova. That's what I went looking for. A friend of mine had, let's go out under here. It's hot under here. A friend of mine in school had a 70 Nova Super Sport automatic small block car, 350, and we used to go to Taco Bell at lunch and In and Out and all the stuff that we did. We go to the racetrack if they were racing, because I didn't go to school a lot in high school. I was in California. I could ditch. So half of my classes were shop classes and half of them were required classes, and I had a way of getting out of the campus. It was chain linked, and we had guards. We had campus guards in California back in the 70s. But I was also in machine shop, auto shop, body shop at one time. There was a body shop and an auto shop, and welding class, metal, they called it. Machine, and then there was metal. And my teachers were cool. I could get out their doors and go out, get in our cars and leave. But my friend had that 70 Nova, and we went all over in it. And I loved that Nova. So I could have had a Camaro. I didn't want a Camaro. I wanted a 55, but you have a better chance now of finding a 55 than you did back then. There was lots of them, but you got to remember, we didn't have the internet. So your world was small. And the 55s that you would find would just be junk. Junk 55s now are no junkier than they were in the 70s. They were worn out junk cars. And I didn't mind working on a car, but I I wanted something to drive as well. So I never did find the right 55, but I found this thing at Selman Chevrolet in Orange, California. It was sitting on the lot. So that was 77, this is a 72, so it's 5 years old. Had 30 some odd thousand miles on it, 350, turbo 350. It wasn't an SS. It was dark green, and I hated the green. I didn't like green, but I liked the car. Already had a set of hooker headers on it with good exhaust. Somebody at a muffler shop put it on with Corvair turbo mufflers. Back in those days, you'd get GM, and I worked at the GM at a Chevrolet dealership in the parts department. You get a GM muffler off of a turbo Corvair, and that's what turbo mufflers came from, was Corvairs. So it had a set of factory GM turbo mufflers on it and full length tailpipes that turned down right here. They pointed at the ground right here. It was super nice. The exhaust was awesome. I mean, it was equally bent, done super well, not welded with coat hangers and a torch. It was welded with a torch, but it was done very well. That made me want the car. It had dark green interior in it, which I wasn't a fan of, but when you're desperate and you're 16 years old, you'll take stuff that you didn't necessarily want. My dad paid for half of it. I worked every summer, every vacation, I worked with him through school, even all back in junior high school. He was in construction, building apartment buildings and banks and everything else in Santa Ana and Orange, Garden Grove, Tustin, all over that Orange County area. My dad paid for half of it. I worked every summer, every vacation, I worked with him through school, even all back in junior high school. He was in construction, building apartment buildings and banks and everything else in Santa Ana and Orange, Garden Grove, Tustin, all over that Orange County area. And I would work with him, and I saved my money. So I saved $900, and that car was $1,800 when I bought it off the lot, which most of my friends were buying $500 cars, but I wanted that car. So my dad, and he didn't have a lot of money, he gave me $900. Somewhere I've still got the receipt where he wrote a check for $900 and I wrote a check for $900, and that was $1,800, and I've had it all these years. When I got it, I was so proud of it. I said, I'll have this car when I'm 80. And one of my aunts laughed, and she said, yeah, everybody says that. You won't have that car in 2 years, or something dumb to that effect. To me, that's a challenge. Okay, challenge accepted. Well, I guess I'll have it till I'm 80, maybe, if I live that long. And if I don't, somebody in the family will have it. I'm not going to sell it out of spite, because I said that many years ago that I'd have it, so I'm keeping it. So in 1977, I painted this car. It was that dark green. One of my best friends, or my best friend, was working at a Chevron station just a couple blocks from my house. He was pumping gas and doing mechanic work. And he was a year older than me. He graduated the year before me. He had some really cool cars. Super Sport Chevelles, 73 Camaro, that lots of stories with that. 3.2 barrels on this thing at the time, and wide fender flares and an L88 hood scoop. We had a lot of fun. He had LS5 71 Chevelle, and he had some kind of 396. I don't remember what horsepower, probably a 350 car, 4-speed 70 Chevelle. We went all over Southern California. We cruised Whittier and Van Nuys, Orange. That was our thing. We just, every night we'd go cruise somewhere and street race those things. But he was working at the Chevron station, and some of you might even know the owner's name was Chevron John, or Hemi John, people called him. John, and I can't say his last name, I never have really known how to pronounce it, Demolisi or something to that effect. I'm friends with his son on Facebook. Unfortunately, John's passed away. John had Hemi cars out the wazoo. This is 1977 and 78, 79. John had a stash of Hemi cars, and he'd have one or two at the station all the time. And one of the ones he had, I'll see if I can find a picture and put it in here, was a pretty famous old race car, and I'll put a little bit of a history of that in here if I can find the pictures. It was a 68 Dart, and I thought it was a Hemi car all these years until David Freiberger and I got to talking about it, and his son, and it turns out it was a whatever, a 383 or 440 car, still a rare car, still a factory race car kind of setup, but it had a Hemi in it when I knew it, and it was painted like this, but it was bright blue where mine's dark blue, like my Willys. So it was the same color as that Willys, but it was silver and candy apple blue panel paint, and that car stayed in the station for a long time because he worked on it. He was putting it back together, and I loved it. So I painted this one the same, except green, because of the green interior. And I just didn't like green, but I couldn't change the interior. I couldn't afford that. Didn't know anything about dyeing interior back then. But I painted a candy apple green and silver. Should look like this somewhere. I'll put some pictures in here. We'll try to feed those in. But when I graduated high school, I came to Arkansas, and my car was quite a standout here. In 1980, and so in 1979, I believe, Scott Sullivan from Ohio had the 67 Nova. That was kind of technically the first Pro Street car, and there's people that'll argue with that, but it really was. He's known as the father of Pro Street. Pro Street back then didn't carry the same kind of stigma that it does now. Now it's basically a Pro Street car. It's got a 2,000 horsepower motor and fancy interior and no roll cage. But back then a Pro Street car was basically what we would call these things. They were race cars. None of us had money for cages. Didn't even think about roll cages. We just put as much horsepower on them as we could. But it was a car that we actually used and raced. And Scott Sullivan had the original Pro Street 67 Nova. See if I can find a picture and put that in here. It was on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. I loved that car and still do. Scott's like the all-time coolest guy and builder, and he still does it. Scott's got Cheese Whiz 55. You've all seen that. He's got so many bitchin' cars. But so in 1980, this was still a relatively new car. We moved here. I didn't have a job yet. It was hot. It was July. I decided I'm going to cut the rear end out of it. I didn't have any tools, didn't have a garage to work in. I had dirt. We lived in a dirt. I went from a California nice garage and paved driveway, of course, to Arkansas dirt driveway and hot summer. And I jacked this car up, probably with a bumper jack, honestly. It would have been a bottle jack if it wasn't a bumper jack. Took the rear end out of it. It was a 10 bolt, and took a torch, not a plasma torch, not a battery powered cutoff wheel like all of you are used to now, including me. We didn't have that stuff. We had a torch. My dad's uncle had a machine shop, but it was old. It was tools from the 30s. And I used his torch and cut the floor, the tubs and the trunk floor out, took that rear end out, and I found a 12 bolt center section at a local junkyard here. They cut the axle tubes off of it because they were scrapping the stuff. And there's this 12 bolt center section laying there, and I thought, so I bought that, and I took my 10 bolt axle tubes and I cut them off, and they didn't fit. They weren't the right size. So I took a big, heavy grinder, not with a soft floppy disk, but with a hard rock grinder, and I ground those tubes down carefully till I could make them hammer into that 12 bolt housing. And I drilled plug welds and welded it on the outside with nickel rod. I knew enough to do that stuff. I was a good welder, but that was with the AC machine and just an old cracker box Lincoln welder, and put that 12 bolt together, narrowed, made my own mini tubs and made my own rear floor, put a fuel tank in the trunk. So in 1980, these pictures that you'll see here, it had an H50 15 on a 10-inch wheel. That was big. Nowadays, it's nothing. But it took a mini tub to do that. So I had 10-inch wheels under the car, looked kind of like it does now, but of course it's set higher, and I had the leaf springs on it. I took the factory multi-leafs off and I put a single leaf off of a 6-cylinder car, and I made whatever I had. Oh, I had a ladder bar that clamped to the front spring, and it floated on the back. It had holes in it. It was a steel plate. I can't remember the brand anymore, but I had those on there. You know, suspension was much simpler back then. And so this car became a Pro Street car in 1980. And that was a year behind Scott Sullivan's. I mean, he had already had his built, but it came out in the magazine in '79, I believe. So I consider this to be one of the first Pro Street cars. Obviously not the first, but there wasn't many. You didn't see Pro Street cars back then. And I call it Pro Street because it's the biggest tire I could get. The biggest street legal tire. The big Mickey Thompsons, they weren't made yet. We didn't have those big friggin' Mickey Thompsons that you'd put on 15-inch wheels back then. There were no 15-inch wheels. 10 or 12-inch wheel was about as wide as you'd get. So to have tires of, you know, an H50, I mean, an N50 15 would be way out here if on stock suspension and stuff. That's what most people would do back then, would be to cut that quarter panel out and let the tire hang out that far. So to have H50, I keep saying, I had H50 14s under it in California. N50 15 under that, and I've actually got one of the tires out back. That's kind of funny because the other day when they were cleaning up, they found one of them. It's destroyed, but it's been laying out there for 30 years. But an H50 N50 15 Mickey Thompson Indy profile. The older guys will remember the Indy profile. Under the fender further than this was. These barely fit under here. This is a 13-inch wheel, and they're in the same mini tubs that I put in it in 1980. I did replace them, but they're the same configuration. So it's a little, the N50s were in a little bit further than what this 315 radial is, but that's a 13-inch wheel. Back then I had them on 10-inch wheels. So that's kind of the history of the car. It's set. When I moved here, I bought a 69 Super Sport 4-speed 350 horse Chevelle, and I restored that nut and bolt when I was 20 years old. I sandblasted every piece of it, replaced the quarter panels with some that I cut off of a car out of a salvage yard, and other than putting quarter panels on it, the floors were perfect. I rebuilt the original motor. It was number matching. That was a beautiful restoration that I sold at Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1983 or 4. But I had that, and I had my California look Volkswagens that I built. So I had a lot of different stuff. I had a 67 Nova that I built, and this thing took a back seat. So I parked it. I ended up buying my own shop with my friend in California that worked at the Chevron station, and I decided to build a blower motor for it. In 1980, I didn't have the money to buy a blower. We had just bought a business. I bought a GMC blower off of a truck. It was still green, Detroit diesel green. And I took that blower and went to the city, bought bearings and gaskets for it, learned how to turn the rotors around and do what I needed, got the proper end plates, and took a Offenhauser 360 manifold, which is a single 4-barrel 360-degree manifold. It was just a common one. Dyer's blowers back then made an intake out of those Offenhauser manifolds, and they would weld a plate on top of it and bolt the blower on. So I copied that. I got a piece of 1/2-inch plate, took my Offie 360, went to a local factory here, asked them if we could machine the top of it down, welded some studs on it to support the plate, bolted the plate on with flat bolts. I polished that blower by hand with my thumb and sandpaper, had it shiny as the one on the Willys, because I did the same thing to the one on the Willys, and made my own drive. Take a look at this stuff. So on the Nova, this is Hampton Blower's front cover. This is the stock end plate, and there's two different kinds. This is the good one. I used this on my Nova. I polished the case just like this. This was also a green blower when I put it on here. And I used a stock front cover off of the GMC, and they had a triangle plate here where the fuel pump would drive, I believe is what it was, 3 bolts, and I made a cover for that, and I made this bearing and shaft and drive assembly. I used an axle out of a truck, so it had a flange on it. I machined that down at the local factory. I used another end plate. I cut it up into pieces and got the bearings out of it in the place where the bearings would mount, and I put 2 of them together, and I made this snout. I welded all that together and welded it on a plate here that I could bolt to the front of the cover and use that truck axle. And I bought a hub and a pulley and an idler pulley and the lower pulley and belt. The rest of it I made. The intake manifold, the old blower, converted it. I bought a rear plate instead of using the stock one. I did buy a BDS back at the time, rear plate, and that was 1982 or 3, 4, I don't remember. And I put it on a small block in this thing. I stripped the paint with a grinder, 36 grit, just barely scored the metal, but I ground all the candy apple green and silver off of it, and I had my mind I was gonna paint it black. Well, it's set in bare metal I built this shop in 91, and it was still in bare metal when I built the shop, right? Because you cleaned it up.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met Debbie, that car sat in bare metal for 7 or 8 years, and then it sat over here. When I only had this front shop, when I built this front shop in 91, it sat right there. And Debbie was a young girl that we got acid that I still use all the time, this metal etching acid. And it just had, I kept it coated in that. It didn't have hardly any rust, but Debbie cleaned it up, and I primered it, epoxy primered it, and put K200 for you guys that remember PPG product.
And that was in 97.
Was that 97? Okay, so it's set in bare metal then until 97. So it's set in bare metal from 83 probably to 97. So I thought it was longer than that. So that's what, 12 or 13 years? Because that's what I used to think. I just haven't put all this together. It literally set in bare metal that long. And I ended up, interesting, I drove this thing around here without insurance, and our local insurance, State Farm, Shield of Shelter insurance guy came to the shop one day. I said, I need to get insurance on my car. He looked at it, he said, this thing? I said, yeah, it's my car. I need insurance on it. I can't insure that. They would have my job, because it had a blower sticking out of there was no hood on it at the time. Like, you guys think that sounds silly, and it does sound silly. Back then, he flat refused to insure my car because it had a blower. I got pissed. It's like I was tired of it. I pulled the motor out, sold the motor, put it in a Dodge D50 truck that I put, by then we could get the big tires. We put Pro-Tracks, the biggest friggin' Pro-Track you could put on it. And I sold him the motor, and I sold the blower to somebody else, and the car sat until 2015 in yellow primer. And you'll see some pictures of that. There'll be pictures, I'll put those up here. I dug that car out, had the slot dish mags on it still. Can't stand slot dish mags. Sorry for you guys that love them. I know the world loves them now. In 1977, I had slot dish mags because that's all I could afford. If I could afford Kragers or Centerlines or Super Tricks, I would have had them. Even Daisies, S200, 200Ss, whatever. I would have had them, but I couldn't. So I had slot dish mags from either Pep Boys. I think I got the rear ones maybe from Pep Boys, and I think I got the front ones from Super Shops, Garden Grove Racing. And I had them because it's all I could have. I had 4-inch on the front and 10-inch on the back. had a little bitty 165 Volkswagen tire on the front and those Mickey Thompsons on the back. But that's the way it's set until I decided I'd pull it out for drag week, and I was going to paint it like a marina blue, and everybody said, put it back the way it was. They all remembered it, my friends back then. Put it back the way it was. I said, I wouldn't have it the way it was. I hate it. I've been there, done that. I don't want green. Put it back like it was. I said, I compromised. I put the same exact paint scheme on it, but that is a black base coat, and I'll show you more of that, but you might see some of it in the light if you look at that quarter panel. So it's a black base coat with a pretty big flake, and on top of it, silver flake, and then it's got candy blue over the top of the black. So it's almost black, like I almost would have done back in 80, whatever, 2 or 3, whenever I stripped it. And on the roof, it's got lace. So it's 2 different colors, 2 different paint schemes, but I compromised and put that panel paint on it like I did in 1977, but not the same color. So in any case, the car is still the same. It's still got the subframe in it that it had. The factory subframe. It doesn't have a super duper chrome moly tubing front frame. Whoever builds all those frames, it's got the stock control arms on the bottom. Let me zoom out. She got this thing zoomed in. I did put a coilover shock on it, QA1s, I guess, and I did eventually make a set of tubular uppers, and it's got a set of lowering spindles now. And then when I put it back together in 2015, I put a Mustang or a Pinto rack, whatever it is. This one's a Pinto. Well, let's see. Yeah, the Pinto without the bolts over here. So it sets in the cradle and held on with basically radiator hose clamps and then 2 bolts over here. And the control arms I notched. I wanted to keep it as much original because of my high school roots as I could. But you know, you don't see subframe connectors. What the heck? Every one of these things has got subframe connectors going back here, and you can see where this is from Jack's, but this did have subframe connectors back in 1980. It doesn't have that now. It's got to be a loser. Well, what it's got is this outer frame rail. And then it's got inner frame rails that run from the main hoop. They're inside the car. They come out right here, run forward, and go back across to the outer frame rail here. So it's got a 25.3 chassis. It's certable at its weight to go 650. See the funny car cage up in there? I built all that in 2015. So it's stock floor pan, stock suspension, even stock control arms, all steel except for the hood. Nova. It had close to 3,000 horsepower in it. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But let's get it down and clean it up. Stirring out dust. So I'm going to clean it up. But for this video, let's wipe right here just a little bit. I've done it a little bit. Look at can you see that? Yeah, you can see it pretty good. So that's silver base coat like this with lace put on top of it, and it's black. I sprayed black on top of the lace and then put metal flake, as I remember, on top of that, bigger flake, and then candy blue on top of that. So that's the roof section. And all this dust, yeah, it's going to scratch the paint. I'm going to buff it sometime anyway. But that's the black base coat with the candy blue and the heavy flake. You see different angles here. So it's pretty stunning in real life in the sun. It really, man, it doesn't want to focus. It really looks good in the sun. So when I did the turbo motor in it, I wanted to do a cowl hood. I've got the steel hood off of the car, the Super Sport hood, and painted the same scheme with the stripe down the middle like this is. But I built this, I put a hardwood fiberglass hood on it, and I didn't want to paint it blue. I didn't want to try to match it, so I painted it black. I built an intercooler for it eventually, because I ran it on when I moved it to gasoline. I built an intercooler and just a bell core, and I put it in front of the radiator, moved the radiator back. I hate it. I hate intercoolers. One of the things that sucked so bad about this car was the placement of the turbos up front. They're so in the way, and this intercooler just made it very troublesome. And to change plugs and stuff, working over the fenders, I changed the plugs over the top of the tires, but I would not do that again. All the wiring's still there. When Alex pulled the motor out of it, she labeled everything. The ECU's still inside. The headers up and forward to mount into these turbos, they would get the hood hot. So when we were doing drag week, I'd take the hood off and put it on a trailer, which is stupid. I hate that. And the header was close enough to the master cylinder, it would get the fluid hot and you'd lose brakes. So it wasn't so bad unless you're on a hill. And 1 year, 16, 17, they put us on the tail of the Dragon
16.
on drag week. And Jake and I lost brakes on this thing going down the tail of the Dragon. That was called Tail of the Dragon in Tennessee. That super well-known crooked road. We had no idea what we were getting into, and we lost brakes. We sat in the middle of the road. Luckily, we got stopped. We had no trailer brakes. The transmission, good turbo 400, that was in the 55 forever. No hold back. So when you'd let up on the gas, you would just pick up speed. It didn't care. And we're going down that tail of the Dragon and I hit the brakes, and there was nothing. And the fluid would get that master cylinder so hot that it would just boil. So I will not do this again. This is just a mess. Having a big block in there, and I built a sheet metal intake manifold, and it was nice. And you'll see in the pictures, because it had a magazine feature, and I'll show some of those pictures. It came out of the intake manifold, went down into this, and I bolted this on with an O-ring instead of just welding it on. Had this intercooler, just weight. All that stuff up there is just weight. It's a radial car with no wheelie bars, which is so weight's up front's a little bit good, but I don't want it again. I don't like, after that, it's so easy. Everything about this 55 is so well thought out and engineered that it's hard to go back to this. I can lift the front end, Alex and I'll set it off, and I've got easy access to everything. And it's so nice. This thing was such a pain. It was miserable to work on. I did cut the cross member out. You can see down here where I made it removable. 2 pieces bolted in so I could get the pan off of it. And I had the same girdle setup that I have now, but if I go back together with it, I'll cut the firewall out, recess it, and put the turbos back here, and the headers will go down and back. I'll change the subframe because I wanted that, because is the one that I had in high school, but it's heavy and I won't do it again.
2018, that was our hurricane year.
Oh, that's when we went on Tail of the Dragon, 2018. So that's the factory door panels that were in the car when I got it. I did dye them black when I put this back together. So it's got the 25.3 cage, got all the shifter set up on pods, got the Holly dash, the big dash back in those days. Oh, look at that steering wheel. Yuck. So it's got a Vega GT steering wheel in it, and I had that since high school. But it's the plastic, just look at that. Would you like to grab a hold of that? Nasty. It's coming out. The dash, kind of cool, because when Jake and I were doing drag week, he'd sit over here and I could turn the dash to him or turn it to me. I got a spring, got that mount there, and it stays tight. I could adjust, we had tables where I could adjust boost, timing, and idle speed off of my knobs here. Just easy to do. What else is in here? Had cell phone holders for he and I. Had the fire system. No, I don't have a fire system. Wait, do I have a fire system? Yeah, I had a fire system. I don't know where it's at. That's a CO2 bottle mount there. Somewhere there's a... Oh, it's in the trunk. Fire system's in the trunk. Parachute handle. Fire handle up here. Chicken handle. Full funny car cage. It was actually a comfortable car. These are set on the floor as close as I can get. Factory rear seat still in the car. All these interior panels are original. I put a headliner in it when I built the cage. Doors are still fully, that's exactly the way it sounded in 1977 when I got it. All that's still original. It's a different trunk lid because I wanted to build a wing and I didn't want to drill holes in my trunk lid. So we bought an aftermarket steel trunk lid and I made this wing to bolt to the trunk lid. I remember most everybody has rods that come down and you got to pull pins out of the brackets on the bumper. I built this wing. I remember being at, let's see if I can shut this thing and latch it unless something's hitting there. I remember being, when I first built that wing, I was at Drag Week. Tom Bailey's looking under there. He looks at it. I turn my back and he walks up and and he walks away. He's like, that's got to have rods, you would think. It doesn't have to have rods. I can almost sit on that thing. But that's because I TIG welded these brackets. Everything's bent, bolted to the deck lid. It's super strong. So there's the street tank. That's huge. My parachutes are still in here. The race tank's over here. It's got its puke tank up here. That's a water meth tank back when we were trying to run the stupid pump gas, or not pump gas, but gasoline. Yeah, the Stroud fire bottle set on this side. So this is full of, this is my pipe that went, my charge pipe that went in the top of the intercooler. I made this adapter so I could bolt it on instead of having a rinky-dink welded on thing. Window net's still in there. The tile, waste gates, Holley fuel filters, everything's Holley. So that big street tank, we could drive a lot of miles on that. In 1977, window tint just became a thing. I remember it. So before film type window tint, they did have a liquid window tint. You could put it on at the top, put a stream across it, and it would run down. It was one big giant run. And that's how window tint was done for the few people that had it. Believe it or not, everybody didn't have window tint back then. It became a thing when I was in high school. And I tinted these windows in '77 when I got this car. And it was highly illegal. And I was in Southern California, and the police hated me, and they hated any kid with long hair and a hot rod. This thing was candy apple green with big tires, and a big part of the time it had a tunnel rim sticking out of the hood, because I did do that when I was still in high school. I had a tunnel rim and I converted it to a 4-speed. It was originally a turbo 350 car. That lasted probably a month after I bought it. And I bought a Muncie and a clutch and bell housing out of the Santa Ana Register newspaper. And I was working at a Chevrolet dealership, Guarantee Chevrolet in Santa Ana. So for school credit, I would go to work at the dealership for I think 2 hours a day in I think 10th grade. And I'd get credit, and then when I'd get finished with the credit, that was my last class or 2 classes of the day. I'd go clock in and I'd work the rest of the day until 5 o'clock and they paid me. So I was in the parts department, and that dealership was a high performance dealership. They had, and still is as far as I know. In the parts department, we had L88s, LS7s, LS6s, LT1s, all in the crate. We had all of the camshafts from GM, the Dunto 3030, all the LT cams, all the camshafts, and I don't remember the numbers anymore, but you know, I used to know the part numbers. We had everything in stock, and I worked at that dealership, and I don't remember exactly how I found out about window tint, but they hated kids. I would get tickets in this car, sitting at the school, waiting for my class. I'd get to school whatever time, 7:45, sit in my car listening to Sex Pistols or Ramones or something, some kind of punk rock on my 8-track. And and multiple times, and I say this, I'm saying it like it's regular occurrence. It really was a regular occurrence. They would stop. I'd be parked on alongside the road. They would stop, get out, and write me tickets for whatever they could write me a ticket for. So at that time I had an H50 14 on an 8-inch wheel, 14 by 8 in the back. I could get that under the fender, and it would rub if I hit a bump. It had air shocks. It would rub the fender right here, but the sidewall was not out past the fender. It was underneath the car, but it would rub, and it didn't cut the tire because I had rolled the fenders, but it would just score, you make a mark on the tire. When the car set stock plus just a little bit in the back, they wrote me tickets for no mud flaps. So they made me put mud flaps on this car. That's how the Santa Ana Police Department sucked. I hated their guts. That's the reason I'm in Arkansas. I put a mud flap. I went to Pep Boys and got a plastic mud flap, and I screwed it under here out to this width. It come down and it went back to right there. So the tire was completely under the car. I went to the donut shop down the road, as funny as that sounds. The cops would all gather at the donut shop. It was a fix-it ticket. I had to have it written, signed off. I remember pulling in, going over to these cops, eating their donuts and drinking their coffee in the parking lot, and they all didn't want to look at me or anything to do with a long-haired punk kid. And I finally got their attention. I said, I need to get a fix-it ticket checked off, and they didn't want to stop what they were doing, eating their donuts. So I probably pissed them off. But they walked over, he's eating on his donut. I tell him that my mud flaps, I had to have mud flaps, showed him the ticket. He laughed at me out loud. He thought he made me feel like a fool. He laughed at me and said, that ain't gonna work. You gotta bring them out and lower them down. Like, are you serious? It's gonna look like a truck. He made me go back, and I brought my mud flaps out like 2 inches, and I brought them down to here. I went back and got somebody else to sign the ticket off. Had these big, ugly mud flaps on a car that the tires were under the quarter panels. But those cops thought that they were really funny back then. Anybody that they didn't like, they profiled. I looked like somebody that was trouble to them. And I was. I mean, I'm driving a really nice car. But I was so upset. And they wrote that fix-it ticket off. I immediately went home, took my screwdriver and pulled my mud flaps off and threw them in the trash. And made me very much resent the Santa Ana Police Department. I hated them. They just did this to me all the time. So I also had fog lights were kind of a cool thing back then. So if you had fog lights on your car, you would get a ticket. You couldn't, a lot of people would mount them on the bumper, and you had square fog lights here, or hang them under the bumper. Sounds ridiculous, but it was a thing. And I thought I'd be tricky, so I put mine behind the grill. I had lights back behind the grill, just square, stupid little fog lights. When I was talking about that window tinting, that was what got me off on all the illegal stuff. I mean, didn't matter what I did, it was illegal somehow. And boy, the Santa Ana Police Department loved to torment me, but that window tinting was highly illegal. So anybody that had it was going to get in trouble. I remember putting it on my friend's car, and we knew we were going to get in trouble, but we hoped that we could, you know, not be seen. When you first put it on, you don't want to roll the windows down for a day or two. But we went to Whittier Boulevard, and that night, after we put it on his door glass, which, you know, probably a dumb idea because we knew that Whittier Boulevard was crawling with cops because they were out to get everybody with a hot rod. But we were there, and of course we got pulled over almost immediately, and they wrote us fix-it tickets mostly. That was their favorite thing, make you fix it and then get it checked off. And cop pulled us over, and we couldn't roll the windows down, you know, in time. We knew we'd tear the window tint off. So as we're sitting there, we're standing there actually. He was driving, it was a 70 Chevelle. And he's standing in the passenger door open. I'm standing with the driver's door open. Cop's writing us a ticket for the window tint. We just looked at each other. We were both thinking the same thing. I grabbed mine and he grabbed his and ripped it off the windows. And that cop was writing his ticket, and he looked up when he heard the noise, and he looked at us and took the ticket, wadded it up and got in his car and drove away. I mean, we just got tickets for everything, for doing nothing. Never got caught for street racing. They never got us for that. They get you when you're sitting. And this thing is dirty. Look at I don't know what's on it. There's overspray and exhaust fumes. That's one coat and it's rough. One coat of detailer. That's 2 coats. I'm just trying to get some of the dirt off of it. This one doesn't have a year. Hot Rod Drag Week impound. Hot Rod Drag Week 2018 impound. 15th. When was the 15th anniversary? This was just the 20th, wasn't it? So 5 years ago.
It's 20. You didn't drive it in 20.
Well, I was there.
We did COVID year.
Hot Rod Drag Week 15th anniversary. Had to be.
But in 20 they didn't have it.
So maybe they had it in 21.
But you guys were in
You explain it to me.
I'll look it up.
Miss Internet can look it up. I just know that Keith Turk put that sticker on there for the 15th anniversary of Drag Week, whatever that was. I was just telling a truck driver out here about coming here from California after I graduated high school mainly because of the Santa Ana Police Department just being such jerks. And he and I were talking about it. He came to pick up the Land Rover.
I just turned it off.
And we were discussing California because he was the same way. He was raised there, but got out of there. And I was telling him about when my dad asked me, he was retiring. He was in construction. And he was retiring same year I was graduating. He said, "You want to move to Arkansas?" I said, "Why would I want to do that? I honestly don't know anything about Arkansas. I don't know why I would ever want to move. I just knew I was not liking what I was in." And he said, "Because you can do anything you're big enough to do in Arkansas." And I was done with California. I said, "Let's go." And we honestly packed up our stuff and moved. So after being here for a while, met a few people, and I was sitting on the street up here one night, probably sitting on this fender. There was a Chevelle, I think, running up and down the road, a hot rod, and it wasn't from town. I knew that. Everybody's talking about it. He was in town looking for somebody to race. So word got out where he was from. He's from the bigger city down the road. And he's just cruising back and forth. When he'd go by us, he'd rev up, rev his engine, try to torment us. We're all sitting there watching this. Well, I didn't know any of the cops, didn't trust any cops. But cop pulls in a few minutes, and he said, "You see that car? That Chevelle running around here?" I said, "Yeah, what about it?" He said, looks at his watch. I'm probably sitting on this fender. Probably had music playing fairly loud. He looks at his watch. He says, "I'm getting off my shift in 10 minutes. We only had one cop car back then. Now we got like 50. But he said, "I'm getting off my shift in about 10 minutes. I got to do my paperwork, and I got to fill the car up." He said, "So I'm not going to be around for a half hour or so, or nobody's going to be out here." He said, "Go get that car." And that's exactly what I did. We raced from the stoplight. Back then there was only one stoplight in town. We raced down the street. I beat him. He kept going. He went back to where he came from. I thought, yeah, I'm in the right place. And I never had any trouble out of the cops here. That guy later became the chief of police. They were cool, and they're still pretty cool. That glue that's on that vinyl sticker is hard to get off, but the gasoline got it. So that's basically all I have for you. I could tell stories about this thing all day long because it was my first car. One of the interesting things, when I went to the dealership and I got this car, I'm 16 years old. Of course, I'm super proud of it. I'm driving home feeling like the best guy in the world. And I turned the radio on, had an AM radio in it, and I hear probably KEZY in California, AM station, that Elvis Presley was just found dead in his bathroom. Not that I was ever an Elvis Presley fan, but my mother was, and a big part of America was, and the world. I got stickers on me. So, it's not like John Lennon to me. I was way more of a Beatles or Sid Vicious, Sex Pistols fan, but it was, it was a milestone. It was a monumental time. So every year when they announced that Elvis Presley died on this date in 1977, and they tell the years, how many it's been. What is that, 40 or 48 years? And I understand people owning their cars, a lot of them are rusted to the ground, sitting out in a field or whatever. But my old car is still a pretty nice old car by any standard. I'm just not really wanting to race. It's not my, I don't want to drive anymore. That's not my big desire like it used to be. When I was younger, I've been there and done that. And we've got a car that we love to drive and take on drag week, and I love it way more than this car. But this car was before that car, and it wouldn't take much to put it back together. So I'll probably do that. I want it back together. Same with my Gasser 55. So I'm gonna put it back together. Turn, let me see that. You've already done this, but look, don't tell me that's not a good looking car. It is a good looking car. And I'll put some pictures from the magazine. One thing I didn't mention was we had this thing at PRI show, and a guy came up from Chevy High Performance, and he wanted to do a feature on it. And they did. They called me troublemaker. So it made about 3,000 horsepower at that time. I never really got it ironed out like it should be. There's a nice shot of it going down the road. Pretty happy with that. Jason Lubkin, he works up at the Speedway Museum, came here, did the photo shoot on it. Is that focusing? Mm-hmm. And did the story. It was one of my favorite shots. He did a bunch of photos. And there's the engine when it's in it. But anyway, that's what I have for you this time. I don't think I want to get into any more stories. You probably don't want to hear them anyway. But that's my old car, my first car, 1977, California. Look at this. There's the original California blue plates. The front plate and the back plate, 1980 was the last time that was registered in California. So those are the plates that belong on the car. It's been here a long time. I've had it a long time. It's a 25.3. It's immaculate, except for no motor or transmission. So I'll put it back together, and maybe you guys will see that someday. Thanks for watching. This is Thursday at 3 o'clock. I'm gonna try to have this out here by 5 o'clock. So when you see it, you'll know that that was today. We'll see you next time.